Welcome back to Mental Notes with Matt, the show where we dive deep into the stories, insights, and soul behind mental, emotional, and creative well-being. Today's guest is someone who left a permanent imprint on me during one of the most formative chapters of my life. Stewart Pearce is a world-renowned voice coach and master sound healer. He's worked with celebrated performers, global leaders, and visionary change makers to help them access the full resonance of their voice, not just for performance, but for transformation. He's the author of several deeply insightful books, including The Alchemy of Voice and Diana, The Voice of Change, a powerful look at Princess Diana's courageous journey toward finding and expressing her authentic voice. Stewart is also the founder of the Magnetic Voice Academy, an online space where he shares decades of wisdom about the healing frequency of sound and the truth that lives in the breath. I had the honor of studying with Stewart during my third year of college while training at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London as part of the conservatory program at Rutgers. At the time, I was still discovering who I was, not just as a performer, but as a person. And Stewart's voice, his presence, and his belief and boldness cracked something open in me that I've never forgotten. Today, we'll explore what it means to reclaim your voice, your real voice, and how sound, breath, and vibration can reconnect us with the parts of ourselves we've been afraid to speak from. Stewart Pearce, it's so nice to see you after so long. I think it's been 21 years since I trained at the Globe with you. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me.
It's truly wonderful to see you, Matt, because I remembered you so well, and obviously life has thrown the dice for us both individually in certain ways, so I haven't seen you for all this time. So as soon as I got your email, I know it's taken a little bit of time for us to get together, but as soon as I got your email, it was just, of course I remember you.
I think I threw in that little story of being in your class, and I think I was feeling a little out of sorts and, a little homesick maybe and out of my element. And you said, you need to do something really wild, like chop off all your hair. And sure enough, a few days later, I shaved my head. And I just loved that feeling of being given permission, to do something bold that maybe I wouldn't have done on my own, just being given that sort of push. And I think we'll probably explore stuff like that within this conversation. I mean, so let's kind of just get into it. You write about something called the signature note, which I understand to be that unique vibrational sound that each of us has within us. And I remember you helping us begin to find that at Shakespeare's Globe. And so I'm wondering, what does it really mean to discover your signature note?
Well, I can approach it from two directions. Maybe if I start with a very famous line from Rumi, who said, if words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. So there is that. And obviously, we can hear that I believe this is me, this is my note, this is the whole of me in sound, in the vocal sound that I produce. And it has certain qualities about it. But whatever those qualities may be, it would be too conceited for me to talk about that. But whatever those qualities are, it's me coming from the core of me. It's me coming from my center.
Right.
And so when I speak of the signature note that we each have, it's really the optimum pitch in the very core, the very center of our compass, our vocal compass, all the sounds that we make in our speaking, which, of course, you and I know that because of masking ourselves, because we're frightened, because of nervousness or fear or trauma, because of social conditioning, etc., 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 we often mask our voices. They become very tight within our bodies, and as a result of that, it's very difficult to breathe, so we can't really feel the fullness of the resonance. But if we breathe and really open up the throat, the whole of our interior opens to the experience of the breath, because it is our life, to breathe in as we did, as we shot out of our mother's birth canals or were lifted from her belly. This is the first time we breathed in, and then the great roar of life. And then the last thing to do is to breathe out, and we pass into an experience called dying. And for all of us, may that be peaceful and harmonious. And it's obviously an inevitability. Um,
Absolutely.
let's hope it's all very fine. In between, we don't breathe. We simply ignore our breath, even though it is the very core of our life. So, to find our note, to find the optimum pitch, is rather like finding the song of one's soul. You know, it's almost like that feeling of falling in love for the first time, where there
Mm.
is this ebullience and this glory and this magnificence and the magic and the oh, I could go on and on and
It's
on and
just,
on
it's
and
an
on.
undeniable feeling, I think.
But we come to the very core of our beings. And the one
Mhm.
thing that we want to do is to either adore or pleasure the one that we love
Mm.
on whatever level that can be experienced in terms of our human behavior. However, if we go back to the physical, purely the physical nature of sound, because our voice is a physical means that we use to communicate the way we think and the way we feel. So to go into the physicality, we can often rearrange emotional programmings that have led us to those masks, or led us to those fears, or led us to the trauma. And suddenly, by dealing with the physicality of the voice, i.e., breathing and positioning the sound, what we can do is to open up often fields of resonance that we didn't even know existed because we closed them down as a result of fear or inhibition or conditioning or trauma. And as a result, I'm just reminded in this moment of one of the jobs that I did recently for the UN was to go into Gaza and to work with aid workers who've been there since October the 7th or October the 8th,
Wow.
2023, who are all experiencing severe levels of PTSD and battle fatigue, which means that often they're so hyperadrenalized that they become constipated. And all of my work is about flow. So I moved in to say, okay, well, I think we need to unblock the blockages by
Yeah.
introducing flow. And so we breathed and we chanted and we identified those aspects of their beings that were held in trauma or held as a result of hyperadrenalization, stress, stress, stress. And now I'm glad to say that they're all pooing like mad. So there are many unseen possibilities. However, physically, if you imagine that the whole of your range is sitting here on a horizontal, like a keyboard, like a piano, it allows us to identify in our minds more easily what the signature note is. Because we know about the piano that its signature note is middle C, and it divides the treble from the bass. So if we relate that to our voices, which I'm about to do, if I play with my right hand and my right hand alone, you get a lot of treble. And if I carry on talking to you like that, you're going to wonder in a moment, what is Stewart doing? Where's his voice gone? Because that sounds rather shrill. It sounds rather metallic. It sounds as though he's very anxious or that he's connecting with the frightened child within. If I go right down here like this, and carry on talking to you like this, one or two things may happen. Number one, you might fall asleep, probably will. Number two, you're going to be slightly concerned about this sepulchral sound that I'm using, and is there something wrong with me?
Mm.
But if I play with both hands, you get a mixture of the treble and the bass together. And the way to find this, because that's my note, is to take the horizontal, make it vertical, put it into your spine, and the middle, surprise, surprise, is the upper abdominal area or the heart area. If
Mm.
words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. So that's a simple way of expressing it, which everybody seems to love. So I love telling the story.
I love it too. It's very easy to digest that and understand it. And it's striking to me because obviously, when I was in London and working with you, we were working in the capacity of performance. But it's always been so amazing to me how transferable the skills that we develop as creatives are so important just in everyday life. I think that we're all trying to reach a level of authenticity in ourselves. And as you say, there's just so much fear, there's trauma, and there's so much nuance that's brought all of us to where we are today, and but finding and being able to drop into that middle note, that note that is you, I think is incredibly important. And that's a really great way to have explained it. So I appreciate that. A lot of people listening, especially, those that are dealing with anxiety and burnout, or even just everyday disconnection, especially in 2025, rapid fire communication. People are expected to be available and responsive at all times of the day and night. It's difficult. It's difficult to express ourselves in that authentic way. How can the voice become that tool for reclaiming our truth and power in those vulnerable moments?
Mm. Well, the big dilemma that we're all facing, but in facing that dilemma, we're really all on a cusp between what was and what could be, which seems, as we measure the whole of our societal function, whether it be to do with the arrangement of central government, the financial institutions, religion, or indeed the crises that's happening in relation to Islam, and how much of that thinking has permeated into the leading establishments of education, the Ivy League establishments in the US, and also the major, what we call red brick, the established orders here like Oxford and Cambridge. And really what the dilemma is that for the last 450 years, we've been encouraged to do. And all of our educational system or our socialization process is based on doing, quantification, and not quality.
Right, right.
We're human beings. So the difficulty with doing most of the time, and I say this forthright because I had real problems being taught. And we didn't know about this in the 50s when I was a child, but I'm powerfully dyslexic and synesthetic, so I have a crossover of senses. So I see sound. I saw sound as a child, which is why I couldn't read, because I was being taught the cat sat on the mat. Everything was broken up. And for me, it was all about flow. Because I could see sound waves, colored, full of light. Anyway, so that, was a metaphysical experience.
It's incredible, though. It's incredible, and I think it's important to pause there for a second and just recognize that how we are able to take in information is different, and it's, I think, very difficult sometimes for folks that operate in a very specific way to see outside of the way that it works for them, especially if a large group of people tend to learn and behave in that certain way. Kind of ties in with this idea of conformity and and us versus them. So I think it's really important to recognize, because I also learn very differently and work very differently, and we're often put into these boxes of you have to do it this way, which can be very frustrating and also stifle your authenticity.
Well, that's the key, Matt, isn't it? Because in our doing, most of the time we're not doing what we could be doing because they say so,
Right.
whoever they may be. And they could be imprints from childhood. Those people are no longer around in our lives. It could be our parents, it could be our teachers, it could be our peers. But the point is that we're not being the extraordinary beings that we are, because we're constantly trying to relate to, oh, but I must be that.
Right.
So the quantification is, what are you, rather than who are you? And so all of my work is about unmasking the individual, removing the egoic conspiracy theories that have been set up, that we've often constructed ourselves, in very loving and gentle ways, in very gracious ways, to uncover what the truth of our being is. And of course, when we do this, our physiology responds, because our bodies are these, almost like these cosmic vehicles. They're completely self-organizing, completely self-correcting, as we're discovering, because you no longer need to die of cancer. People heal cancer. It's miraculous. It's magical. But we're beginning to see what creates it, which is fear, I believe. I mean, I've interfaced with female cancer for over 45 years, because my own mother died of it, and I nursed her all the way through 18 months, the last 18 months of her life. And that was a big turning point for me. So within the therapeutic aspect of the work that I do in the world, often women hear about me and they come for empowerment skills and they've been told you've got 3 months to live, you know. So we look into, well, what has created the cancer? And, you know, I won't go further with that because obviously that's um, an holistic metaphysical approach, which isn't necessarily in complete concurrence with allopathic medicine at the moment, although more and more and more great allopathic doctors are waking up to the fact that we are more than just science. There's
Right.
something else going on. And we're talking about, because you're a sensitive, we're talking about our emotional bodies and realizing that feeling is the language of the soul. But we haven't been allowed to really live our feeling impulses. It's different for the actor, which is where we meet,
Right.
because we know that at the core of great acting is a truth of feeling statement.
And it's encouraged.
And you know, if we can be that, then the people stay in their seats, or they don't switch the TV off, or the tablet off, or the computer off, or their phone off.
And what's interesting is that the people that are observing those actors on stage living out truthfully those experiences, the reason I think that they're so moved by it is because they relate to it, you know, and they can see themselves in different aspects, maybe not the specific experience they're viewing, but the feeling behind it. And I think that one of the reasons why the arts is so powerful to people is because it is a way for you to reach some sort of catharsis because you don't get that opportunity in your own life to live truthfully in how you feel because of all the things that you've been saying.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Laurence Olivier, the great actor, said, art is the only vindication for suffering.
Mm, mm,
So we literally hold a mirror up to nature in the oral culture of theatre or acting, film, TV. We hold a mirror up to nature and we explore often the shadow complexes of what's taking place and how hopefully within the story there is a redemption. If it's very dark, we move into the light, or at least there is, as you say, a catharsis for the people who are watching because they begin to see their own reflection in behaviors before them. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so on that note, there's a deeply spiritual dimension to your work, one that blends this the traditions of ancient sound and modern psychology. So, how do you see voice as a bridge between our physical presence and that soul's deeper expression?
Well, sound is at the core of creation. So if we go into every single culture on our planet, and whether it be religious organization or indigenous tribes people, there is the belief in the fact that sound created the planet, the universe, you and me, literally. And so I believe that sound, our voices, are bridges between the secular and the sacred. That when we use sound in certain ways, they become transcendental bridges into the multidimensional aspect of our infinite potential, which means that we experience the multiplicitousness of what life is all about, which may mean that we're connecting with non-corporeal beings. We're connecting with spirit beings, such as angels. I was met by a group of angels in 1987. I didn't intend it, but it became a divine transmission. So I've remained faithful to those 12 angels. And now, God, do we need them? They're thoughts of God, they're emanations of the divine. So they come in to remind us of what the superlative aspect of our being is all about as humans, and particularly in relation to unconditional love and joy and delight and bliss and passion and wonder and awe and adventure, all of these ecstatic states that we know that when we're feeling them, we release hormones in our bodies like oxytocin and serotonin, and we automatically feel much better and we become heroic in our gestures in life, where the problem that was once there becomes resolved and we move into an arena of activity creatively that is far beyond anything that we ever saw ourselves achieving. I was only talking with my brother the other day, and he said, who would have known that we would have been like this when we were kids? Because we had, for the first 10 years of our lives, we had this extraordinary twin soul like connection. And then life induced us into living different paths. But what's interesting is that he is also a great teacher, an international teacher within his own particular definition of spirituality as a movement back to wholeness.
Mm. Seems like there's a lot of resistance initially from a large segment of people to the ideas behind spirituality as a way in. You were talking earlier about the holistic type of medicine and information as opposed to, modern day science, which obviously has a major place in helping to heal. But I definitely feel like there is a lot of resistance to utilizing some of the benefits of those holistic ways in, whether it be supplements or just the mindset. I think that there needs to be a little bit of buy-in from some people. Would you agree with that?
There is. I mean, because I've been actively pursuing this pathway for nearly 50 years,
Yeah.
I've always been aware of the multidimensional nature of life through the very extraordinary experiences that I had with a child, largely because, as I was just referring to, the nature of the fact that I found it difficult at school, but my grandfather was a farmer. And he knew about the soil, and he believed in the fairies because the fairies came to help him with his crops. He had 20 men and some women who worked for him. He used no machines. It was really before the machines. He had horses and oxen that pulled the plows. And John Barker was loved by everybody because his hands were always in the soil. And I watched him grow things miraculously. A lemon pip would be taken. He'd put his finger in the soil, put the pip in, spit on it, put the earth in, and 6 months later there was a lemon tree there. I mean, it was anyway. So, farmers know about the preternatural. They know about the supernatural because they're working with animals or they're seeing the cycles of the crops and how they're guided by the circadian rhythms of our planet and the natural rhythms of our planet. And of course, therefore, we are in relationship to the other planets. To ignore that is just plain stupidity.
Yeah.
And of course, the field of quantum physics is opening up that dimensional interplay so that we can begin to understand more and more the wonder of what we are. And right at the core of it is sound.
And presence. I'm thinking about farmers. They have to be present and have some faith, I think, also. And that brings me to, you taught about the power of stillness and breath, a lesson that maybe I didn't fully understand until years later. In today's overstimulated world where presence feels harder to access, how can we return to that quiet center again? Like farmers that are in the present and they're creating life and sustenance.
Well, I mean, we need to be in nature. We need to be in nature, at least touching nature once a day, which in our metropolitan community lives is very difficult. But if I didn't actually go and be with the trees once a day, I would not be the person that I am.
Yeah.
And, I like me. My life is very successful. Although I was started off life, as I was often referred to as being, you are nothing and you will always be nothing. That's what I was told. And I always remember in my littleness as a child, I always remember thinking, I think I'm something.
I love that so much. It's so powerful and so simple to just say, I like me. That's is a quote from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the John Candy movie with Steve Martin from the
Uh-huh.
80s. I don't know if you've seen, but he has a whole powerful monologue that he starts with, I like me. My wife likes me. You know, just made me think of that. You really do need to have faith in yourself and your abilities and the I guess the courage to be authentic. And I love the ways in that you're discussing here. Before we wrap it up, for someone listening right now that is feeling particularly disconnected from themselves or their voice or, their power that they have within them, could you give us maybe one simple practice that they could begin today to reconnect with their core sound, their signature note?
Yeah, as awful as those moments may be,
Yeah.
they are some of the greatest and most powerful moments in our lives. What's interesting is that many of us choose desperation to wake up as opposed to inspiration. The inspiration comes when we're in joy mode, but the desperation comes when there's a build-up of pressure, which can happen over many, many, many years. So if that's the case, we need to release the pressure by finding somebody that can help us understand what breath is all about. And the simplicity of going somewhere, even though we may feel mad,
Mm.
where we feel safe and secure, breathing in and humming through our hearts. It releases serotonin immediately in our bodies because the vagus nerve feels the fundamental note that we've just sounded. And our bodies will always lead us, if we allow them to, in the direction of healing, relaxation, de-stressing, decompressing. So in simplicity, that is so simple. The difficulty is that we don't do it.
Yes.
Now, I know that I couldn't be who I am if I didn't spend 25 minutes a day lying on my back and breathe the exact same thing that we did all those years ago at the Glow when you were there. I lie on my back in supine and I breathe deeply and I sound through the chambers of my body.
Yeah.
And
It's
therefore I can be, who I want to be and serve in all sorts of different ways. Because going into a battlefield is not easy, particularly when we're sensitives, because we pick up all of that discordant, disharmonic, and in many ways our metropolitan communities are becoming battlefields because there's so much dissonance,
yes.
cognitive dissonance. Whereas if we can move into consonance, if we can move from disharmony into harmony just by humming, or if we can allow ourselves to move into Om, we automatically feel better.
It's incredible that it is that simple. I think that there are quite a few people, and I think when I was younger, I also felt a little bit like, oh, this is kind of silly. And that's a shame, I think, because it is pretty simple and your body does know what to do. And teasing out that type of information through the simplicity of humming and listening to your body is incredibly powerful. And I think worth people buying into and at least giving it a shot without judging it too harshly.
Yeah, and for those people, I would say, when you go into your headphones whilst you're traveling on the subway or while you're in your car listening to that audio, what are you listening to? And many people are listening to their favorite music. So what we're doing in our listening to our favorite music, we're listening to that because we like it, because it does something to us. So there we are using sound to reharmonize selves because we feel that as we drive listening, we are decompressing. And sometimes we sing along.
Yeah.
Think of all those recordings that, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. He was a British guy, but he was an LA talk show host that would be seen driving along with Cher or with Adele or with Gaga.
Oh, yes.
They would be
Yes.
they would be joining. I can't remember his name for some reason. He was a client of mine many, many years ago, and I can't remember his name in this moment.
Escapes me as well, but I know who you're talking about for
That's what I'm
sure.
talking
Yeah.
about. There's a perfect opportunity. Let's get together and make sound.
Stuart, thank you so much. This is such a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate all of your insights. And not just for the conversation, but for the profound wisdom you continue to share with the world and for the impact that you had on me all those years ago as a young artist, learning to breathe, speak, and show up fully. To those listening, if you want to learn more about Stuart's work, his book, Diana, The Voice of Change, or his offerings through the Magnetic Voice Academy, visit stewartpearce.com. And remember this, your voice is more than sound, it's energy, it's presence, it's power. And when you find your magnetic voice, you don't just speak, you resonate. Until next time, breathe deeply, speak truthfully, and stay tuned for more Mental Notes with Matt.